News of the Times, Whitechapel Chronicles 2, Blood in Bucks Row. From the deaths of Ada Wilson, Annie Millwood, Emma Smith, and Martha Turner, a new terror emerges. In the early hours of August 31st, 1888, the East End of London woke to horror. A woman's body, savagely mutilated, was found on a quiet cobbled street. Her throat slit from ear to ear, and her abdomen torn open with terrifying precision. She would soon be identified as Mary Ann Nichols, known locally as Polly, and her death would mark the beginning of something far darker than anyone could have imagined. This episode plunges into the raw fear and chaos that followed the murder. Drawing exclusively from the newspapers of the time, we piece together the early theories, the clashing testimonies, and the desperate hunt for answers. Was she the victim of a maniac, a ruthless gang, or something far worse lurking in the East End shadows? From the eerie silence reported by nearby residents to the blood trail leading nowhere, the crime scene offered more questions than answers. Eyewitnesses heard faint cries of murder and police that vanished into the dark. Theories about Leather Apron and the High Rip gang spread like fire through the gaslit streets. As the mortuary doors closed behind Mary Ann Nichols, the streets of Whitechapel bristled with unease. The newspapers screamed, the community trembled, and the killer, whoever he was, walked free. This was no ordinary murder. It was a rupture, a warning, and it marked the moment when London stepped unknowingly into the shadow of Jack the Ripper. In today's end of episode further particular segment, we are still in 1888. It's not every day that the corridors of the Royal Courts of Justice echo with tales of iced breakfast at twilight, postcard indictments for ancient grudges, and the occasional flaming carpet. But then again, Francis John Poor Bellwood was not your everyday Englishman. Now, if this sounds like it was penned by a feverish Conan Doyle during an absinthe fog, do feel free to do the modern thing and like, subscribe, and share with others equally fond of obscure and not so obscure crimes and polite narration. It helps, apparently, though we're still unclear precisely how. And now we throw back the curtains to the dark underbelly of Whitechapel in 1888. Background. By the end of August 1888, the grim rhythm of violence in East London was accelerating. Just weeks after the public reeled from the brutal stabbing of Martha Tabram, Whitechapel woke to yet another horror. A body, mutilated and discarded like refuse, was discovered in Bucks Row. The woman had no name, no purse, no known killer, but what the police and the people of Whitechapel did have were questions and fear. This episode, drawn directly from the contemporary newspapers of the time, walks step by step through the grisly discovery, the unfolding investigation, and the pulse of a community on edge. The discovery in Bucks Row. Constable John Neal was on his usual beat in Bucks Row and Thomas Street when the gaslight revealed a terrible sight. Lying near a stable yard door was the body of a woman, throat cut from ear to ear, blood pooled around her head. From the Manchester Courier of September 1888. Scarcely have the horror and sensation caused by the discovery of the murdered woman in Whitechapel some short time ago had time to abate, when another victim of crime has been discovered in the same district. The initial assumption was that she had been killed where she lay. Her throat bore 2 deep slashes and her abdomen had been ripped open. Her hands were bruised, some teeth were missing, her face disfigured. A brown ulster coat hung about her. Her clothing was cut and torn. The police arrived swiftly. The woman was transported to Whitechapel mortuary. The street, dimly lit and narrow, quickly filled with a crowd of curious onlookers. Whispers travelled faster than footsteps. Some claimed to have heard the cries in the night. Others insisted they had seen nothing unusual. The ordinary had suddenly become ominous. A body without a name. As inspectors combed the area and mortuary attendants sorted through her effects, there was little to go on. The woman had no belongings but a broken comb and a shard of a looking glass. From the Witness Examiner, April 1888, the brutality of the murder is beyond conception or description. Not only was the unfortunate woman's throat cut in 2 gashes with a sharp instrument, but the knife was stabbed into the lower part of the abdomen and savagely drawn upwards twice. Police believed the murder was the work of a ferocious maniac. It was this belief that some madman had slipped through the shadows with surgical violence that began to fuel the dread of an entire district. Theories multiply. Words of the murder spread quickly. Some suspected gangs known to blackmail and abuse local women. Others were convinced the murder was committed elsewhere and the body later moved. From the Manchester Courier, it would appear as if the murder was committed in a house and the body afterwards removed to the place where it was found. The inquest had not yet begun, but newspapers speculated the woman came from Lambeth Workhouse. The press filled gaps in knowledge with vivid detail, and rumour became near fact. Policing in Whitechapel was already viewed with scepticism. The murder only heightened public frustration and calls for reform. In coffee houses, pubs, and behind lace curtains, people began to whisper who would be next. The trail of blood. Residents of nearby Brady Street noticed something unusual. Drops of blood dotted the pavement, some spaced just feet apart, others pooled, suggesting pauses or stumbles. The trail zigzagged, as if the victim had crossed the street several times, possibly disorientated or pursued. Eventually, the trail led to Honey's Mews. From the Edinburgh Evening News, there was a large stain looking as if the bleeding person had fallen against the wall and lain there. From here to the foot of Buck's Row, the trail of blood is clearly marked. The sheer mystery of the blood trail confounded even seasoned detectives. Had the killer carried her? Had she run? And how had no one seen? No weapon was found, no screams reported, just a pathway of blood slowly drying beneath the morning sun. Voices from the night. Witnesses began to surface, and a woman named Mrs. Colwell described waking to faint, terrified cries. Murder, police, murder, police, she recalled. She screamed 5 or 6 times, each fainter than the last, and seemed to be getting further away. I heard no other voice, no steps. She was alone. Residents like Mrs. Green, who lived just feet from the murder site, insisted the night was unusually quiet. I'm a light sleeper. I heard nothing, but the body was laid out straight, as if someone had gently placed her there. Nearby factory watchmen also reported no disturbances. The killer had worked with astonishing silence. A name emerges. After much speculation, a woman from Lambeth Workhouse came forward. The victim, she said, was Mary Ann Nichols. From the Edinburgh Evening News, April 1888. She had been living apart from her husband for years, discharged from the workhouse just months before. She had briefly taken work in Wandsworth, but left under suspicious circumstances. Her final hours were traced through accounts of her drunkenness and her final chilling boast. "I'll soon get my DOS money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now." She was last seen alive on Whitechapel Road, shortly before the murder. Her journey ended in the gutter of Bucks Row. Scene in Bucks Row. Details of the murder scene painted a chilling picture. Mr. Perkins and his wife, sleeping across the street, heard nothing. The watchman at Schneider's factory, mere feet away, also heard nothing. Neither did the wool depot's watchman. From the Whitechapel Gazette, April 1888, the murderer worked with uncanny stealth. There was no struggle, no scream, and yet the brutality was unspeakable. Searches continued through stables, alleys, and the surrounding yards. The trail of blood confused more than it clarified. But the conclusion was clear. The murder had likely occurred elsewhere. Some speculated she had been killed whilst undressing, and her clothes quickly reassembled to create the illusion of a street crime. Speculation and fear. Police suspicion shifted towards a mysterious figure known only as Leather Apron. A man whispered about in the back streets, said to lure and rob vulnerable women. In the words of one witness, his dodge is to promise money and shelter. He takes what little they have and half kills them in return. Another woman, reportedly a friend of Nichols, claimed Nichols had once been married but had long since been abandoned. Her descent into poverty had been swift and merciless. As night fell on Whitechapel, residents locked doors and looked over shoulders. A chill settled over the alleys, not from the air, but from the uncertainty, the fear that someone, somewhere, was preparing to strike again. Funeral and final thoughts. By the end of the week, Nichols was buried in a quiet ceremony. The police had no suspects, no weapon, just a blood-stained trail, rising panic. The women of Whitechapel grew fearful. Rumours multiplied. The sense of safety, if it had ever existed, was gone. Gaslight flickered across narrow lanes, casting long shadows. In the pubs and marketplaces, a single question echoed. Who would be next? The killer was still out there, and the blood had not finished speaking. The detail. The morning of August the 31st, 1888, began with a whisper of dread in East London. A woman's mutilated body had been discovered in Bucks Row. Her throat slit so savagely it nearly severed her head. Her abdomen cut open with cold precision. She would soon be identified as Mary Ann Nichols. A doctor's first encounter. From the South Wales Echo, 1st of September 1888. Dr. Llewellyn arrived at Bucks Row shortly before 4 a.m. Called by a constable, he found the body lying on its back near a stable yard door. The legs were outstretched, the arms placed by the side, the throat was slashed from ear to ear. The extremities were still warm, he reported. Death had not long taken place. Crowds were already gathering. The doctors ordered the body to be removed to the mortuary and instructed police to alert him if anything further emerged. There was not more than half a pint of blood on the ground, he added. That, and the position of the body, made me think it likely He was killed elsewhere and placed there. The horrors revealed. By 5:30 a.m., Dr. Llewellyn was summoned to the Whitechapel mortuary. I was astonished, he said, at finding the other wounds. The throat gashes were likely inflicted with the left hand. A bruise near the jaw and a matching thumbprint suggested her head had been pushed back. There is a gash under the left ear, reaching nearly to the centre of the throat, and another started from the right ear, he noted. The vertebrae are slightly injured. The wounds could have been inflicted while she was still dressed. He concluded, I have seen many terrible cases, but never such a brutal affair as this. Inspector Helson and a district in fear. Inspector Helson, now leading the case, acknowledged the difficulty ahead. There is so little to guide the police, he admitted. There does not seem much likelihood of success. While theories swirled of a lunatic loose in Whitechapel, others believed the killing to be the work of a gang extorting money from women, taking revenge when they couldn't pay. The evidence was sparse. In Nichols' pocket, a handkerchief, a small comb, and a piece of looking glass. No money, no weapon, only question. Identification and her final hours. Word spread. Women came forward to the mortuary, and one group from 18 Thrall Street recognised the body as Polly, a woman they had lodged with. She was turned away that night, one said, didn't have her fourpence. She laughed it off and said, I'll soon get my DOS money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now. She was later seen at around 2:30 a.m. near Whitechapel Road. Later still, she was dead. A woman from Lambeth Workhouse, Mary Ann Monk, confirmed it was Mary Ann Nichols. They had shared space in the workhouse that spring. Polly, she explained, had taken a domestic job in Wandsworth, but fled after stealing £3 from her employer, and she had drifted since. Conflicting blood trails. From the Edinburgh Evening News and the South Wales Echo, September 1888. Blood trails were said to stretch from Bucks Row to Brady Street. Some witnesses claimed to have seen spots and small pools. Others denied any trace. Inspector Helson himself stated he walked the area and saw no blood beyond the usual grime. How could a woman be so violently murdered and yet leave so little blood? Was she attacked in a nearby house? Was she moved post-mortem? Some pointed to the state of her clothes, loose but not sliced. Perhaps she was undressed, killed, then redressed. Perhaps not. The mortuary and a city stairs. From the East London Observer, the 1st of September, 1888. The body was taken through Eagle Place into the mortuary, a small brick building behind the Whitechapel Board of Works. Her clothes, soaked in blood, lay on the ground outside. A dull red cloak, brown skirt, check flannelled petticoat marked Lambeth Workhouse, and battered Springside boots. Inside, the reporter described a sickening scene. The gash across the neck was 6 inches long, over an inch wide, they wrote. The hands were still tightly clenched. The lower body was worse. A terrible gash from abdomen to diaphragm, the bowels protruding. Her face, they said, bore the agony of death. She wore no rings, no jewellery, nothing to distinguish her but the wounds. High Rip Gang, or something worse. Theories multiplied. The High Rip Gang was said to blackmail women, brutalizing those who refused to pay. Within 12 months, 2 other women had been killed in similar ways. The press noted, left in the street, no obvious motive. Other voices whispered of Leather Apron, a feared figure said to extort and attack women under the guise of offering help. The streets, poorly lit and poorly policed, became a playground for fear. A letter to the editor from the Evening News, 6th of September 1888. A resident wrote, "There should be more gaslights in our back streets. These women were butchered by their bullies. Let the police watch the haunts of these villains. There are dens in Whitechapel where crime is born." He added, "We pay taxes. We deserve light. My sister was attacked in darkness. A neighbour robbed near his own front door. We live in shadow, and someone is killing in it." The signature read simply, "Albert Backert, Gordon House, Newnham Street, Whitechapel." The funeral of Mary Ann Nichols. From the Morning Post, 7th of September 1888. The funeral was carried out in near secrecy. A decoy hearse was sent out first to divert the crowd. The true hearse slipped into the mortuary's back entrance. A polished elm coffin bore a plate, "Mary Ann Nichols, aged 42, died August 31st, 1888. Only her father, Edward Walker, and two of her children were present. The procession moved towards Ilford. Policemen lined the streets. The blinds of nearby houses were drawn. The city stood still. The investigation stalls. From the Sheffield Daily Telegraph, the 4th of September 1888. Inspector Spratling searched the area, including railway embankments and alleys. Nothing. Inspector Helsam described the condition of her clothes, no cuts beneath the stays. Horse slaughterer Henry Tompkin worked nearby, claiming he heard nothing. He believed she was murdered where she was found. Charles Cross, a carman, had discovered the body. Her clothes were above her knees, he noted. The inquest was adjourned. No arrests made. The fear takes hold. As reporters gathered details, residents gathered behind locked doors. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone feared they might be next. From the East London Observer, like poor Martha Tabram of George Yard, the poor unknown appears to have been the victim of some fiend, both in the dead of night, both with wounds of a most revolting character, both with no clear motive. Even in a district used to violence, the murder of Mary Ann Nichols signals something different. A line had been crossed, and the killer had only just begun. Mary Ann Nichols became the first officially recognized victim of what history would call the reign of Jack the Ripper. But in the moment, there was no legend, no name, only the body of a woman brutally slain, and a city left wondering if it would happen again. Mary Ann Nichols' story is one of desperation, survival, and tragedy in life. She struggled through the cracks of society. In death, she became the symbol of something terrible to come. She wasn't the first, would not be the last. Further particulars. If eccentricity were a currency, Francis John Poor Balewood might have been the wealthiest man in Bath. By the time his brothers dragged him, figuratively of course, into a lunacy inquiry, Mr. Balewood had amassed a resume that included midnight breakfasts, legal threats via postcard, and setting fire to his own carpet with a flaming newspaper. Only a respectable Eton and Oxford man, he had become more of a one-man spectacle, a half-clothed wanderer with a perchance for mineral water, ice, and conspiracy theories. His enemies, surgeons, socialites, siblings, anyone in his path. His habits, chaotic at best, combustible at worst. Naturally, when a jury was summoned to determine whether he was simply peculiar or truly unhinged, the courtroom braced itself for a tale more theatrical than legal. From the Illustrated Police News, the 3rd of March, 1888. extraordinary lunacy case. On a Tuesday morning, a Middlesex special jury, under the direction of Mr. Under Sheriff Birchall, convened at the Royal Courts of Justice under Master Nicholson. Their task was to investigate the alleged lunacy of Francis John Poor Balewood of 3 Pierpont Street in Bath. The petition for inquiry was submitted by his brother, Mr. Thomas Henry Methuen Balewood of Horslington in Somerset, and Captain Arthur Churchill Balewood of the Royal Artillery. This inquiry was mandated by the Lord Chancellor. Representing the petitioners were Mr. Lumley Smith and Mr. Fullerton, who appeared to support the case. The alleged lunatic, however, did not appear with legal counsel. As the proceedings developed, it became evident that they had originally begun in the district of Bath, but were transferred to London at the request of Mr. Balewood, though he did not ultimately attend the hearing. Mr. Balewood was described as a gentleman of about 41 years of age, the son of a country gentleman. He had received a prestigious education at Eton and Oriel College in Oxford. At one time he was known for his strong faculties, but his present condition had deteriorated so severely that it necessitated this formal inquiry. Until 1882 he had resided with his brother at Horsington in Somerset. Afterwards he moved to Templecombe within the same county, and for the past 2 or 3 years he had lived in various places, Birmingham, Bath, and others, though he never settled in one place permanently. He was not considered a desirable tenant, possibly because he led a very unusual life. In recent times his routine had become increasingly erratic. He had formed the habit of rising around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, at which point he would have his breakfast. Then he would go out for a drive in a hired carriage, and upon returning he would dine at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Finally, he would go to bed at about 6 o'clock in the morning. Counsel remarked that this behaviour might seem eccentric, but it was for the jury to decide whether it indicated something more than mere oddity. As for his use of hired carriages, he often kept them waiting at the door for an hour. He would enter them furtively, showing a great deal of caution and watchfulness. His meals, too, were of a most peculiar nature. He consumed a large quantity of ice. He would begin by having a little of his food with ice, then send it back to be warmed, only to add more ice later. His eating habits did not reflect those of an ordinary or reasonable man. Despite this, he was not a drinker. He was no teetotaler, but he consumed large quantities of mineral water. None of his extravagant behaviours could be attributed to alcohol. His general habits were dirty and disordered, consistent with the theory that he was insane. He roamed about with dishevelled dress and appeared to be in a state of partial nudity. A dangerous habit of his was lighting matches and tossing them carelessly on the floor. On one occasion he even set fire to the carpet by lighting a newspaper and throwing it down. He left money lying about and was careless with his letters. Once he even tried to light the gas with an unopened envelope that contained 2 £5 notes. His dividend warrants and similar items often remained unclaimed. In 1886 he took to sending out a curious series of postcards. He had previously gone so far as to initiate legal action against Mr. Budd, a physician and a surgeon from Bath. The case reached the assizes, where the present Mr. Justice Charles was presiding. The proceedings became so absurd that the entire matter was laughed out of court. One might think that after this humiliation he would have ceased such behaviour, but not so. Throughout 1887, he continued to obsess over the trial. He employed a man named Carr to obtain for him lists of solicitors in London and elsewhere. Though he had no acquaintance with them, he sent postcards, including one with the following message: "Wanted to indict a surgeon, Bud of this town, and a Mr. and Mrs. Selwyn for characteristics, opinions, and an ancient grudge. Do you give assistance legally?" In other cases, he included the names of Mr. and Mrs. Balewood. His mind seemed fixed in a strange and repetitive groove. Although he occasionally varied the names, he even implicated Lord Hothouse in his accusations, claiming he too was involved in poisoning. And at one point, he even wrote to Messrs. Flower and Hussey, the solicitors representing him, as late as the 29th of November, in which he referred to the old rogue Bud. He also applied to the local magistrates for a summons against both his brother and himself. Later, he seemed to develop an aversion to his sister-in-law, Mrs. T.H. Balewood, and made accusations against her, and Lady Hothouse, branding them and others as conspirators, remarking bitterly, "Lord and Lady Balewood at play." The sense of persecution seemed to pervade his thinking consistently. Taking all matters into account, the learned counsel stated that it would be charitable to assume Mr. Balewood was simply out of his mind. At the conclusion of the learned counsel's address, several witnesses were called to support the case, with the result being that the jury unanimously found Mr. Balewood to be insane. That concludes this episode of Whitechapel Chronicles 2, Blood in Buck's Row. Thank you. You've been a most wonderful audience, especially you. Yes, you, the one eating cheese. To all of you who have made it this far, we hope this evening's narrative has proven both enlightening and suitably diverting. Should it have missed the mark, kindly forward your grievance to our Director of Historic Biscuit Preservation, who has most unfortunately taken ill, or at least has taken leave, and cannot presently be reached for comment. However, if you found our account agreeable and wish to see such tales continue, we would be most obliged if you would like, subscribe, and share this episode with fellow aficionados of mystery and crime. By doing so, you not only aid our modest endeavours, but also assist in perplexing the enigmatic YouTube algorithm, a noble and civilized pursuit, we think you'll agree. This has been News of the Times, and I am Robin Coles, stepping back from the graveside through curiosity lingers like wreaths left behind.